In my last video, I shared my personal investigation into UFOs and UAP and how I came to find that none of the evidence currently available and promoted by the UFO research community compelled a belief in extra or ultra-terrestrial aliens visiting Earth. Like I mentioned, I continue to be open-minded, and if such evidence is proffered, then I will evaluate. However, I cannot wait forever. But you see, waiting is what the UFO research community wants you to do. UFO disclosure advocates would have you wait for disclosure, wait for whistleblowers, wait for secret documents, wait for the government to reveal the truth. But if you are actually interested in discovering the truth about extraterrestrial life, you should learn physics, study astronomy, understand evidence, and follow discoveries as they occur. The great irony of UFO research is that it is actually counterproductive to the real search for extraterrestrial life. As it turns out, real scientists are actively engaged in the search for extraterrestrial life. One of the most prominent is the SETI Institution, or the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute, which is a nonprofit research organization dedicated to the scientific search for life beyond Earth and to understanding the origins and nature of life in the universe. The idea behind SETI dates back to 1960, when astronomer Frank Drake conducted Project Ozma, the first modern scientific search for radio signals from other star systems. The SETI Institute itself was founded in 1984 in California by scientists who wanted to create a permanent organization devoted to the search for extraterrestrial life. The Institute's mission is to explore and understand and explain the origins, nature, and prevalence of life in the universe. Unlike UFO investigations, SETI focuses on evidence that can be independently verified through astronomy, physics, biology, and engineering. So some of the major activities of SETI include searching for artificial radio or technological signals from distant star systems, operating and conducting research with the Allen Telescope Array, a collection of radio telescopes specifically designed for SETI observations. This array happens to actually be in Hat Creek, California, and I have actually seen it. It's very impressive. But they also study exoplanets and their potential habitability. They research how life began on Earth. They support planetary science missions. And they study in extreme environments on Earth that might resemble conditions in other worlds. For example, some of the deep sea extremophiles from the vents in the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. And they also participate in education and public outreach programs. So SETI represents one of the few scientific efforts specifically aimed at answering the question of existence of extraterrestrial life. Now, its approach is notable because it relies on publicly available data, peer-reviewed research, and testable hypotheses, rather than eyewitness testimony or claims that there's classified information that will come out someday. Even after decades without confirmed detection, SETI researchers argue that the search remains worthwhile because only a tiny fraction of the galaxy has been examined in sufficient detail. So you may recall in my last video, I ended with a picture of what is probably one of the most famous events in the history of the search for extraterrestrial life. It is the WOW signal, and it remains one of astronomy's enduring mysteries. So what happened? On August 15th, 1977, the Big Ear Radio Observatory, which is what the Ohio State University calls its radio telescope, detected a powerful narrowband radio signal while surveying the sky for possible extraterrestrial transmissions. A few days later, volunteer astronomer Jerry R. Ehrman was reviewing the computer printout and noticed an unusually strong sequence of characters. 6EQUJ5. These characters represented the signal strength. The signal was far stronger than the background radio noise normally detected. Ehrman circled the sequence on the printout and wrote the word "wow." And this is actually a picture of the printout that he actually wrote that on. And so the name stuck. The signal had several characteristics that SETI researchers look for. It was very narrow in frequency. It appeared near the 1420 megahertz hydrogen line, a frequency long considered a logical choice for interstellar communications. It rose and fell exactly as expected from a distant source, moving through the telescope's field of view. And it did not resemble any of the ordinary terrestrial radio interference. For about 72 seconds, it looked remarkably like one might expect from a distant radio transmitter. So the other picture here on the right is actually where in the sky the signal came from, near the constellation Sagittarius. So why didn't scientists automatically declare it was aliens? Because science requires confirmation. The biggest problem is that it was never detected again. Over the following decades, astronomers repeatedly searched the same region of space, and no repeat signal was found. Without a second detection, researchers do not have enough information to make a definitive conclusion as to what it was. So some of the possible explanations are that it was an unusual natural astrophysical phenomenon involving hydrogen clouds, a previously unknown radio source, a reflection of terrestrial radio signal off of space junk, and yes, one possible explanation is that it came from an extraterrestrial civilization. None of these explanations has been ruled out at this time. So later on in an interview, Ehrman said, quote, "We should have seen it again when we looked for it 50 times. Something suggests it was an Earth-sourced signal that simply got reflected off a piece of space debris." Now, years later, he also said this: "I am convinced that the WOW signal certainly has the potential for being the first signal from extraterrestrial intelligence." It's important to note that these statements are not contradictory. It could have been something, or it could have been nothing. We need to remain open-minded to both possibilities. The WOW signal demonstrates how SETI works. Researchers found something genuinely unusual. They investigated it, they attempted to reproduce it, and they ultimately concluded, we don't know what it was. Now that's a very different attitude from much of the UFO culture, where ambiguous observations are often presented as evidence of extraterrestrial visitations. The most famous potential evidence of existence of extraterrestrial life is treated as a puzzle by radio astronomers. And that is how it should be. That is how science works. A single unexplained event is interesting, but it isn't enough. Scientists need more evidence before reaching any conclusion. And nearly 50 years later, they are still looking to see if the signal will be repeated. Another famous example of an anomalous radio signal was in 1967, when Jocelyn Bell Burnell and Anthony Hewish at the University of Cambridge discovered an extremely regular series of radio pulses, repeating every 1.3 seconds. It was so precise that the researchers nicknamed it LGM1, or Little Green Men 1. However, after finding additional similar sources in different parts of the sky, astronomers realized that they had discovered a hitherto unknown natural phenomenon, rapidly rotating neutron stars, now known as pulsars. The history of astronomy is filled with examples of mysterious sights or signals that turn out to be previously undiscovered natural phenomenon. But what if Jocelyn Bell Burnell and Anthony Hewish had stopped their inquiry when they first received the signal and decided that it was indeed aliens? This would have not given them any information, and it would have kept them in the dark as to the phenomenon known as pulsar stars. If they had stopped their inquiry, then they would have been wrong. This is why UFO researchers are frequently wrong, because they stop their inquiry into unidentified aerial phenomenon before ruling out all possible natural phenomenon. UFO researchers would have you draw conclusions when what is needed is more information. Now, sometimes more information is not available. For example, the conditions of a given UFO sighting may not be repeatable. It is frequently the case that the witnesses do not have the tools to observe the phenomenon better, or it's possible they do not have the knowledge to understand what they are looking at. To use an example from my own life, I was with a neighbor the first time both of us saw the chain of Starlink satellites. My neighbor did not know about the Starlink program and was in the middle of having a UFO experience. I, however, had read an article in the San Francisco Chronicle that had talked about when the Starlink satellites would be visible from the San Francisco Bay Area due to the reflection of sunlight on the satellites. Because I had this knowledge of what was going on, I was able to explain the phenomenon. It wasn't that I was smarter than the person, it's just that I had more information that they did on that particular topic. This is why I fully support the findings of the 2023 NASA Commission on Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, which recommended improvements in sensors, better reporting systems, and rigorous scientific approach with regards to UFO UAP, rather than the fruitless exercise of speculating about extra or ultra-terrestrials. If you don't have enough information to draw a conclusion about an anomalous event, then you don't have enough information. It is best to leave it at that until you can get more information, or the event can be replicated under circumstances where you have the ability to gather more information. Another great irony of the UFO research community is how little attention they pay to the best tools that we have available to detect extraterrestrial life. For example, the Kepler Space Telescope, launched by NASA in 2009, was sent to determine how common planets are around other stars. Kepler watched more than 150,000 stars, looking for tiny dips in brightness caused by planets passing in front of them. This technique, known as the transit method, allowed astronomers to detect thousands of previously unknown worlds. Before Kepler, scientists knew of only a few hundred exoplanets. But after Kepler, we learned that planets are extremely common. Most stars probably have planets. Many stars possess rocky planets similar in size to Earth. And some planets orbit within the habitable zone, where liquid water could potentially exist. Kepler fundamentally changed the question from, do planets exist around other stars, to, which of the billions of planets might be suitable for life? The other amazing tool is the James Webb Space Telescope, which was launched in 2021 and is the most powerful space telescope ever built. Kepler discovered the planets, and Webb is able to study them in more detail. When a planet passes in front of its star, some starlight filters through the planet's atmosphere, and Webb can analyze that light and identify atmospheric gases. So scientists use Webb to search for water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, oxygen-related chemistry, and other potential biosignatures. Webb has already detected atmospheric components on several exoplanets and is helping science characterize potentially habitable worlds. While Webb has not found evidence of extraterrestrial life, it has narrowed down the search to a list of potential targets for further research. In my investigation into the existence of extraterrestrial life, I want to avoid false positives. This is why I would prefer to listen to astronomers who rely upon the most high-tech instruments that we currently have available to answer this question. So again, I ask, would you rather wait for disclosure, wait for whistleblowers, wait for secret documents to be released, and wait for the government to reveal the truth? Or would you rather learn physics, study astronomy, understand evidence, and follow discoveries as they occur? Speaking for myself, I would like to learn about the search for extraterrestrial life without the distraction of the UFO UAP researcher community, who would have me forever studying grainy videos, listening to unreliable eyewitness accounts, and perpetually waiting for government disclosures that never come. Now, unfortunately, some in the UFO research community have decided to move the goalpost, and they now claim that UFOs and UAPs are not extraterrestrial aliens, but in fact are ultra-terrestrial aliens, such as angels, demons, cryptoids, and a variety of other entities. As you may recall from my first video, this was the view of UFO researcher John Keel. As I have time, I'll create another video to address this issue, but this is all I have time for right now, as I have chores to do around the house.